What's going on, everybody? And thanks for tuning in. Today, I'm excited to have author Philip Fracassi in with me today. I feel like it's kind of been a little bit of a long time coming because I know we've chatted back and forth for a little while now, but it's great to have you. So, Philip, welcome on. How's it going today?
It's good. It's good. Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here, man. It's gonna be
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. So, I know, I know we were talking a little off air about kind of how timing has gotten kind of weird. I know trying to figure out dates and times for getting things done, especially since the pandemic started, is kind of exacerbated, I guess. It's really hard to kind of keep up with things unless you have a dozen reminders.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially for me, as we were discussing, I'm notoriously bad with dates and times and being on time and knowing what day I'm supposed to do things and what day of the week it is. Especially when I'm in my writing mode, because when I'm working, my schedule is such that I work in production part-time, meaning like 6 months out of the year, 6 or 7 months out of the year. And then the rest of the time I'm writing full time. So I kind of balance two careers. I don't like, it's hard for me to work in a business capacity and write in the same day. When I'm writing, I really need to be kind of like, I need all the room there is, right? So when I'm working, I'm better at that date and time thing because I kind of have to be, because I work in like film production logistics. But when I'm not working, I don't know what's up and what's down. So I have like 6 reminders to be here today. So and then you'd remind me again.
I mean, I just sent you a link. It's no big deal, No, I feel you. I feel like the only way I know what day it is based on my daughter's schedule, because I know like what day my mother comes over to my house to look after her while I'm working, and then what day she goes to my mother-in-law's. And I know we had spoken earlier that I thought I wasn't going to have childcare today, and I got lucky that I did. So.
Oh, good. No sleeping baby in the other room.
No, not this time. Yeah.
All right.
No, I have done that before
crazy.
though. Yeah, I did have so I did which I'm pretty sure you're familiar. I did a virtual convention back in January. And I did have one day where I was doing childcare and also hosting 3 panels. And luckily they ended up kind of overlapping with their naps, so it wasn't too bad. But
right,
it was kind of
but
exhausting.
You never know.
Yeah,
you never know.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, so she normally goes down at 2, so I'm like, okay, this panel's got to start at 2, so I got to get her down like 5 minutes before and just cross my fingers that she stays down for at least an hour. Because I was like, I can handle crying for 10 or 15 minutes, but I don't know if I could do it for 45.
Yeah, see, I'm lucky. I'm a little older, and my son is now 20, so I don't have to worry about, I just kind of, I text him every now and then to make sure he's, happy and breathing and all that good stuff. But otherwise, he comes and goes as he wants.
Yeah,
so it's a lot more freedom when they get older.
Oh yeah, see, like we're getting onto the point. She'll be 1 next month, so she's already starting to like explore walking on her own.
That's a fun time.
I mean, it is. I mean, crawling's been insane because, as soon as she like figured it out, she was on the go constantly, which is great for nighttime sleep, but it's not good for like trying to get anything done during the day. So,
right. And you got to go get all those like padded corners and like the doorknob things and the cabinet locks and all that stuff. Yeah, I remember going through all that. It was interesting.
Yeah, we haven't done that yet. She's just like now realizing she can open and close cabinets, but her issue is she opens it and closes it about 5 times. It's almost like an OCD thing. And then she opens it and then sticks her head in and doesn't realize the cabinet like is still there, and it just kind of knocks her, and she like stands there for a minute and then just keeps doing it again. So as long as she's not getting in, pulling stuff out.
Hey man, that's a school of hard knocks. You got to learn.
I know.
Keep the oven burners on. She'll learn sooner or later.
I know. That's what I told my wife. I was like, she'll do it once. Maybe she'll learn from it. If she does it twice, she'll really learn. But as long as it's not like super dangerous, I'm not too worried about it. So
right.
So let's kind of get into things. I just want to know, tell me about yourself. Tell me about growing up. Kind of how you got into writing and screenwriting, and then kind of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So yeah, I've always been I've always been a writer. I wrote my first short story when I was in the third grade, and I fell madly, passionately in love with writing. I knew from that age on that I wanted to be a writer. That was what I wanted to do for a living, which is very fortunate, I think, to have that knowledge at such an early age and to never lose that passion, going on 40 years later. And yeah, so I was actually born and raised in a city called Southfield, which is just outside of Detroit, Michigan, very near, about 3 miles from where Josh Mallerman currently lives. Interestingly enough, so we've spent a Christmas together here and there. And when I go back to visit, that is. And then I moved to LA, where I currently live, in about 91, 92, and I've been out here ever since. Working in the film industry, I worked for House of Blues Entertainment for a while. I owned a bookstore, a rare bookstore and art gallery in Venice Beach for about 10 years. But all that time I was always writing. I self-published a novel, back in the 90s, and wrote 3 novels while I was doing all that other stuff. And it was and then around 10 years ago, I wrote my first screenplay. It was a job for hire, and I wrote it for a movie that was eventually distributed by Disney. And then I ended up doing multiple screenplays for that same production company, all of which were part of these kids movies that Disney did, these buddy movies like Snow Buddies and Treasure Buddies and Spooky Buddies and all that kind of stuff. Not horror, but I enjoyed it. And then I had a movie come out about 2018, I think. I wrote a script called Girl Missing, and that came out on Lifetime Television a few years back. So it's available on demand, actually, through Amazon. If anyone ever wants to watch Girl Missing, starring Francesca Eastwood. And so I was kind of doing the screenwriting thing. And then around 2015, I actually was trying to write a screenplay based on a Laird Barron story. And I got in touch with him and his agent, and we talked about it. It ended up not working out for financial reasons. But Laird and I kind of hit it off, and we became friends. And right around the same time, I kind of had this weird lightning strike epiphany, which was that I grew up reading horror. I loved horror, but I'd never really written horror. All the stuff that I'd written up to that point, as far as fiction was concerned, was literary fiction. It was dark, like the characters were brooding or depressed or, had dark sides to them, but it was not horror. And it wasn't really going anywhere. I wasn't really having any success. I couldn't get an agent. I couldn't sell anything. And so, like I said, I had this sort of lightning strike epiphany. And I remember calling my wife very excited and said, why am I not writing horror fiction? And so I tried. And the first story I wrote, I sent to Laird to read, to tell me if I should stop before I begin. Don't give up the day job kind of thing. And he was very complimentary and very energized about the work. And he gave me some great feedback that helped me tremendously, that still helps me tremendously. And that story was Mother, which ended up, I then rewrote and sent it on to Jared Dunham's Manor Press, Jordan Krall at Dunham's Manor Press. And that was the first publisher I'd sent it to. It was the first time I'd ever submitted a story, and he accepted it within an hour, I think.
Wow.
And then I had sent it. Laird did a blurb for me. I sent it to Paul Tremblay. He did a blurb for me. And this is Paul. I think this was right before Head Full of Ghosts came out. So I knew of Paul, but I don't think he was. He was still relatively. Hadn't quite come out with all the new novels that are doing really well now. So I had these cover blurbs, which looking back on now, I'm like, oh my God, how did I do that? Like back from Laird Barron and Paul Tremblay, and the book came out and it sold really well. And then I wrote another story called Altar, and Dunham's Manor put that story out. I think I think it was a year later, and that story kind of blew up, and that led to me getting an offer for a story collection from Journalstone, and that became Behold the Void, and I was off and running. And then from then I've just been, I think I've published about 20 short stories. I've published 2 novellas, the collection, and then I have another collection, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, coming up in June. And then I had my first novel coming out on Halloween. And I have other books coming out in 2022, which is very close to being able to announce as well. I'm actually just finalizing the contract with the publisher. My agent's working with the publisher to finalize the contract points. So things are going really well. And I've kind of stopped writing screenplays and really focused on the fiction writing. And in a way, I've had more success from the film industry perspective with the fiction writing, because I've had 3 short stories optioned, 2 of which were optioned by large studios and are currently under option with these large production companies. But haven't been publicly announced, but which is amazing. So it's kind of like, it's so much easier for me than, because the screenwriting is really hard, and we can talk a bit about it, but it's really hard because it's not like fiction at all, because you're not writing a story and every word is up to you and every decision is up to you and every plot choice is up to you. It's like you're basically creating a framework from which other people will build a story. Actors, directors, producers, the studio. Like when I did Girl Missing, I did, I think, 28 rewrites of that screenplay.
Wow.
The end product of which was still the main story, but definitely very different, budgetary reasons, all this stuff. I wrote another screenplay that was bought but never actually got produced, where it was the same thing for like a year. I was doing nothing but rewrites, and it's not fun and it's not pleasant. And I'm very glad, and I'd much rather we just sell the short story to somebody and say, just enjoy. I'll wait for the check, and I'll keep writing. I'll keep writing more fiction.
Just credit me at the end.
Yeah, make sure I
do what you may.
Make sure I get paid, and God bless. Let some other screenwriter guy spend a year writing that thing 400 times. I'd rather write another book.
Yeah, so it's almost like writing an outline for somebody else to like critique and bring to life, I guess. And then they're like, okay, fix this and come back to us, and we'll see if it works.
Yeah, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and it's still the story for the most part. But you read about stuff like this all the time, even especially when you get into big budget movies where they have like 18 screenwriters or whatever. And yes, basically you are creating a framework, but there's so much involved with screenwriting. It's not just the story. It's like, can we afford all these locations? Can we afford a car crash? Can we afford an explosion? When the casting began for the Lifetime movie, my 68-year-old, 7-foot tall butler became a 5'2", 50-year-old, Hispanic actress. So, and who was great, and I ended up becoming friends with her. But it was like, okay, I got to do a whole rewrite because now none of that guy's actions or dialogue make any sense. And there's things that happen on the day where you're at a location and there's a weird way the doors open. This literally happened. And the director's like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we had this sort of like play on the doors with the actors? And I was like, sure. So I would like run to the kitchen that we were in, the house that we were filming in, and I would literally rewrite the scene on the spot, and then they would print those pages out for the actors.
That sounds exhausting.
Yeah, and it's fun. That part of it's actually pretty fun. It's fun to be there, and it's a living thing, and all these people. But when you're going through the whole like, we're going to do another conference call with the studio people and the director and the producer, and they're all going to give feedback on all the things they don't like about the screenplay or they want changed or whatever. That is exhausting, because a lot of times what will happen is, and I've had this conversation with other screenwriters, is it becomes sort of a treadmill where like they'll just be like so vague, like, I'm not feeling this character. It's like, that does not, I don't know what to do with that information. Or they'll be like, hey, what if we did this? And I'll be like, that's a great idea. That's how it was originally 16 drafts ago. So we're now going in circles. And that has literally happened to me multiple times. So it does become exhausting, and it feels like it's a completely different skill set. And I much rather, believe me, I love writing fiction. And I love the idea that I write it, I sell it, and what I write is what goes out. And then, like I said, if somebody wants to option the movie and rewrite it into something completely different, as long as the check clears and as long as I get my credit, we're good.
Yeah, I always wanted that because, a lot of people complain when, there's a book based movie and they're like, oh, this is nothing like the book, but if you really look at it, it says, based on X book by so and so. I'm like, it's never going to be the same because, like you said, I mean, budgetary reasons, are probably a big thing because there's a lot of things that happen in fiction that you literally can't do without a lot of money behind it, especially if you're going to be a smaller studio.
And it's just, you can, like in a novel, you can have, 3 story threads. You can have your A story, your B story, your C story. You can have all these secondary characters. You can have, and to your point, you can have giant crowd scenes, and the reality is when you get into making a movie, you have 90 minutes, most novels as written would never be able to film in a 90-minute movie. So, so stuff has to be cut, stuff has to be changed. And I think what happens with those incidents where you mentioned people get unhappy is because people fall in love with the book and they want to see that book and on screen. But the reality is it's 2 different art forms. And it's not apples to apples. And I think, a lot of people, get frustrated with that, but that's the reality. It's just 2 different. It's like if you were to make one of my stories into a painting, or whatever, another piece of music, it's just different. You have to experience it differently and enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah, I think a lot of the issue comes behind is people are like, well, I don't really want to read the book again. I would, but I'd rather watch a movie because it takes a lot less time. I want to experience it again, and then they experience it and they're like, well, I should have probably just read the book again.
yeah. And there's always there's the eternal debate. If you have the option, do you read the book before you see the movie, or do you see the movie before you read the book? I
always read the book first.
Me too. I always read the book before I see the movie, if I can. And there's a lot of times I'll see a TV show coming out or a series coming out or a movie coming out based on a book, and I'll be like, ooh, and I'll jump on Amazon and I'll buy it or download it really quick because I want to read it. Because it's very interesting to me also as a screenwriter, and that may be a medium I attack again at some point, maybe in one of my own stories or something. But it does fascinate me how different how writers go about translating the stories. Mm-hmm. I just watched Those Who Wish Me Dead, the Michael Kurita movie. Book novel that just was released as a film with Angelina Jolie, and he wrote the screenplay, or at least he was one of the screenwriters. And I thought it was really I was almost as interested seeing how he adapted his own story as I was in the movie itself. That TV series Shadow and Bone is a fascinating example. The showrunner, who was the guy who's responsible for writing everything, and he kind of controls the creative. I can't remember his name, but he's the guy who wrote like Arrival. He wrote Bird Box, the movie, and it was his first series, I think. So, and he adapted the Lee Bardugo novel of the same name. Mm-hmm. And I thought what he did was very interesting. He actually created characters because that was a series. So he actually created new characters in order to kind of flesh out what was in the books, which I thought was an interesting twist on the traditional book to screen adaptation model. But it ended up working out really well. I thought I did a great job. Eric Heiser, I think is his name. But anyway.
I gotcha. Yeah, I try to do the same thing. I try to read the book before I see the movie, but there are times where like my wife will be intrigued by something and we end up watching it. So like we did like I haven't read Behind Her Eyes, but she really wanted to watch the series on Netflix. Mm-hmm. And now that I've watched it, I'm like, well, but now I know. Like, do I need to go read the book now? But I still
sometimes the twist in the book in the movie is not the twist in the book.
Exactly.
But yeah, that book is all about the twist. For sure. I haven't seen the show. I read the book and I'm kind of like, I'm good. I don't really need to see a TV show version of that. But if you haven't read the book, I'm sure it's a lot of fun to watch it.
Yeah, yeah, and did the same thing with John Marr's The One. Now the show that they did is vastly different from the book. That's on Netflix. But my wife and I both enjoyed it, and I was like, I kind of like it because I really enjoyed the book and I really enjoyed the show for what it was, because it took the story, it literally just took the premise and then kind of went off on another avenue. And I thought it was really great, and I'm assuming they're going to expand it into a second season. I'm not sure, but
I haven't seen it or read the book. But yeah, it's always a little. I mean, if you've dabbled in both mediums, it is fascinating to kind of compare and contrast, especially when the writer is so. If it's a novelist, does the adaptation, like with Gone Girl, and Gillian Flynn did her own adaptation. So I just find it interesting to see how they do it, how they pull off certain things. It's educational for me.
Yeah. So tell me, what is the, I don't know if fascination is the right word, but with like short stories, because it seems like you've got a ton of short stories out. I mean, you'll have 2 collections now. I know you've got several for sale, on Amazon and Kobo and so forth. Is short story just like the medium of choice, or is it just something that you're like, I can't flesh the story out more to make it into like a novella or a novel, or was just novel writing just not something you wanted to do until you're like, I think I'm going to write a novel?
Yeah, well, I like I said, I'd written a few novels before, and those may or may not see the light of day. But I know what happened was I fell into it. Like I said, I wrote Mother and Altar, and I was having some success selling short stories. And the difference between writing a short story and a novel from a sales perspective is, if you write a short story, you can, I wouldn't say the odds are good, but the odds are much better that you can sell that story than they are if you write a novel, because a story, you have multiple outlets. You can, there's magazines, there's anthologies, there's websites, there's a lot of different people publishing short story work, and there's a lot of people publishing novels. But the difference is, when you have a novel, you either have to find a publisher who's willing to pick it up, and it's a much bigger commitment on their part, because it's like, okay, we're going to spend all this money, we're going to hopefully give you at least a small advance, and we're going to publish this thing, and it's a bigger deal. Or you have to get an agent, and then the agent's going to represent the novel to bigger publishers. So it's just kind of a bigger deal, and it's a much bigger commitment, obviously, to write one. Like, I can write a short story in about a week. I can write a novel in about 3 months. So, including edits and everything. So it's a much bigger commitment. And the question is, do you want to commit that much time without really knowing for sure, or you're feeling like you have a good good chance to sell it? So I think what happened was, I just started writing short stories because I was having success selling them, and I enjoyed the story collection. And then I had an agent. I got an agent, and who was going to represent me for a deal, a tie-in movie adaptation deal that ended up falling apart at the 11th hour. But he continued to represent me, and I had a conversation once where he was basically like, look, you can keep writing short stories all you want, and you can have a very nice life writing short stories, in the sense that, you can create all this wonderful content, you can be a happy person, but you're not going to make any money. Or you can focus on writing novels and actually try and make this a career. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't necessarily that was the reason I started transitioning novels, but it did open my eyes a little bit to be like, to the point of like, you know what, maybe this is the right time to start transitioning into longer form fiction. And I did. So I think I started writing a novel in 2017, and it became this huge, sprawling behemoth of a novel. And that book is probably going to come out next year. Can't announce it yet, but it's a bigger trade publisher. So that's what I'm talking about next year. And then after I wrote that, I wrote like a slew of short stories, and then I wrote another novel, and then more short stories. Then I wrote another novel and wrote some short stories, and now I'm writing another novel. So I've kind of made the decision that, and I'm now my third agent, by the way. So I made the decision that I want to try and make this a career versus hobby is the wrong word, but versus just something I do strictly for the passion of it. I would like to be able to, I still do it for the passion of it, but I would also like to be able to do it, full time, or at least more than half of my time, free time, because I do love writing stories. So I'm trying to basically monetize all this output. And the best way to monetize the output is by writing novels. And now I really love writing novels. And I think part of the success I've had with writing short stories is because of my screenwriting background. I've had training on how to write a story, from the sense of I know the beats that put together a story, with a beginning, a middle, and a satisfying end. So a lot of my work feels very much like either a short film or whatever, because they're full, complete storylines. And so novel writing wasn't really that much of a leap. I had done it before, and I knew I could do it. So it was really just a matter of structuring the story I wanted to tell, and then sitting down and doing the work. So I still love writing short stories. I just turned in a short story a couple days ago for an anthology, but I'm now really, really focused on finishing this new novel, because that's where I want to go. I think Josh Malerman is a great example. Paul Tremblay is a good example of guys who kind of live in both ponds. They write a lot of novels, but they're still working the short story field, because it is a lot of fun. And frankly, it sounds kind of Scrooge McDucky, or Duck. What's his name? Is that Scrooge McDuck? Is it McDuck? Is it Scrooge McDuck?
I'm not sure if it's McDuck is. I know what you're about.
The guy who swims in the coins. But anyway, yeah. It sounds a little materialistic and very non-artistic, but the reality is that with short stories, you have a much better opportunity to potentially option to movies, for movie and TV, because short producers much prefer to option a short story than they do a novel. They want to buy the hook, they want to buy the premise, and they want to hire their own screenwriter to develop it into the movie they can afford to make. So there's a lot of good reasons to kind of keep going in both fields. But the primary reason is because I love writing short stuff. But I equally now love writing novels, and I'm getting better at it as I go. I'm getting a better sense of pacing. This is now my what I'm writing right now is my fourth novel I've written over the last couple of years. So it's a thriller versus horror. So and I feel like I've really got my pants on now, as it were, in the sense that I kind of feel like I really know what I'm doing much more than I did when I wrote that first horror novel. So it's been a good experience, and I'm really enjoying the process.
I gotcha. Who are some of your writing influences over the years, or who have been, or who continue to be?
Well, I always say Laird Barron is probably the biggest influence on me. He was an early mentor for me and really helped me develop some much needed skills in writing fiction, and had some amazing feedback. And we talk a lot, and he's still, I think he's read pretty much everything I've written. I sent him a lot of stuff before I sent it to a publisher to help me, to see if he has any thoughts or and I really enjoy getting his feedback and his writing. There are certain writers whose writing transcends the story. And another way I would put it is they have such a singular, unique voice that when you read their work, it has a different feel, a different texture, than maybe like another writer. And Laird Barron has no equal in that regard. Like when you read a Laird Barron story, it's so dense and you get so immersed, and he has such a way of, you know, making the language physical, and it's so brooding and dark, and you know, he's such an amazing writer. Paul Tremblay, again, same way. Like, I feel like Paul has such a unique voice. Like when I read a Paul Tremblay story, it has a kind of like really light, you know, stone skipping sort of like buoyancy to it, but like he really throws those punches. So, you know, I really like reading writers like that because I like reading other voices. As a writer named Ralph Robert Moore, who is a big inspiration, he writes very visceral prose, like shocking, you know, prose, and you know, shocking violence, and but not gratuitous. Like it's you can almost feel what he's describing, and he was a big influence on me as well. So, you know, and even like reading guys like Josh Mallerman, and you know, guys like Joe Lansdale, of course, you know, there's a lot to be taken from reading that kind of stuff. I do read a lot, and I read a lot of nonfiction, but I also read a lot of fiction. I like seeing how people are doing different things. I even, you know, I read really mainstream fiction because, you know, I like reading like I said, how they pull stuff off, what kind of pacing they use, you know, what tricks they employ. So most of my reading is for educational purposes, although I do enjoy a lot of the stuff I read, but I also am always reading with an ear for the prose and the writing style, and just how they do different things, especially now that I'm writing a thriller. I've been reading a lot of thrillers, and I'm very interested in the structure of those, you know, thrillers, modern thrillers, and how they kind of let the pieces fall, and, you know, how they assemble the puzzle and then solve it at the end or whatever. So I enjoy a wide berth of, you know, different stuff.
I gotcha. Yeah, one of those books that I'm kind of looking forward to the adaptation is The Last House on Needless Street. I don't know if you've had a chance to read that one yet, but
Yeah,
Ward's prose in that book is kind of like you talked about with Laird and Paul and them, is if you really feel it, and it's very different from anything else. And I mean, just within like the first few pages, man, I was just hooked in that book because the way she wrote her characters, the way that she wrote their perspectives, it was just it was so different. And it engaged me. I mean, I flew through that book. It was so good.
Yeah, it was a great book. I really enjoyed it. And that's, again, an interesting way to write a story, right?
Yeah.
She had a very specific agenda. And that story was as much about structure as it was prose, but to your point, the prose is great, and she had a very unique style. So that was a really fascinating book to read. I learned a lot reading that book, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about your books. So I guess your piece de resistance so far has been Behold the Void, has been your big short story collection. You won a couple of best of awards for that short story collection, a couple of bigger awards. Tell us a little bit about I guess that collection as a whole, and then maybe a little bit about some of the stories that are involved.
Yeah, so that collection is sort of like a nice roundup of what I would consider, which is sort of ridiculous because I've only been doing this for 5 years, but my early work, right? And there's guys who've been doing it for 50 years who are laughing right now, but it's kind of my first foray into short horror fiction or short supernatural thrillers is kind of more the way I lean, but when describing it, but yeah, and I have a copy here. I can show the cover. That's the cover. So this book, it's 9 stories. It's the Mother and Altar, which we discussed, are in there. So I kind of pulled those chapbooks off the market and I packaged them into this. And I probably have more original content in Behold the Void than I probably will ever have in a future collection, because I really wasn't as widely published at the time that book came out. So I think like of the 9 stories, I think like only like 3 or 4 of them were previously published. So it's kind of half and half, which is unusual for a story collection. In Beneath the Pale Sky, I think I have 2 original stories. The rest have been previously published. So, but I really enjoyed writing those pieces. It does represent kind of like my first efforts. But I'm really proud of them, and people seem to really like them. I think at that time I was still sort of, and I still am, but really seeking my voice. What kind of stories do I want to tell? What kind of, how do I want to tell them? Do I want to have a sort of, a certain way of writing the prose for short stories that kind of identify? And what's been interesting since I wrote that book is I've decided the opposite. I've decided I don't want to have a voice. I get very, as a writer, you have to always entertain yourself because there's nobody, you don't have a cheering section necessarily. There's no, boss other than you telling you to get to work. So you have to make sure that you're always engaging yourself as a writer. You have to make sure that it's interesting to you so that it can be interesting to the person reading it. And for me, I like playing with different styles. Laird and I were just talking about this the other day, which is, it's a lot of fun to write really pulpy fiction in one story, and the next story maybe write something that's sort of like surrealistic or abstract, and the next story try and do something more modern, or maybe try and write something in a Gothic style. So I really like playing with different styles. So Behold the Void is kind of, I think, an amalgam of a lot of different styles I was toying with. People seem to, this is the weird thing about writing stories in general and writing story collections is you like, I've literally read Amazon reviews or Goodreads reviews, and there's where people have said, I loved The Horse Thief. It was my favorite story in the book, but I really hated Mandalas, so I'm going to give it 3.5 stars or whatever. And the next person will be like, Mandala blew me away. It was the greatest thing I've ever read. I thought The Horse Thief was was probably the worst story in the collection. I mean, that literally, not those 2 stories, but that literally has happened. And so it's all subjective, right? It's like 3 people can look at the same painting. They're not all going to like it equally. Or hear the same piece of music or the same song. So it's art. And that's the whole point of art, is it's subjective. And so it's been very interesting for me. It was a real learning lesson for me as a writer to know that, like, you can't take any criticism too hard because the next person in line is probably going to feel the opposite way. And so, yeah, Behold the Void, the stories in there, like I said, Mother and Altar, Mandala, which I mentioned, is actually a really fun story. It's a novella at the end of the book. That's a real nail biting thriller, and people seem to really like it. And then I have a story in there called Fail Safe, which is one of the stories that's been optioned. And that ended up being in Ellen Datlow's Best Horror of the Year, and it was reprinted by Nightmare magazine. So that story had never been published. And it's actually an interesting point with Failsafe, again, if there's writers listening, is that story was rejected, I think, like 13 or 14 times. And when it came time to put together the collection, I really wanted to put it into the collection because I loved that story. And I was like, I feel like it deserves to be in the collection, even though all these editors didn't want it. I feel it's a really good story. And then ended up being arguably the most highly acclaimed story in the entire collection, with like the best horror nod, and the fact it's been optioned for film, and the fact it's been reprinted. So you never know. I mean, and you can't really get down on yourself or get down on a story because it's getting a lot of rejections, or because people don't, whatever reason. Because I mean, it's a game. Like, it's just a weird game. Like I said, what one person doesn't like, or what 20 people don't like, 100 people might. You just have to get it to that wider audience, and see how it goes. So that's Behold the Void in a nutshell.
I say, yeah, I've kind of realized that whole like subjective nature, especially with my blog. I mean, I've got 25 contributors in my blog now, and I don't think I would say out of 25 people, maybe 3 to 5 actually agree on the same point for say one book,
Yeah.
where these 5 people would love the humor out of this book, and then it's a turn off for everybody else, or vice versa. It's really interesting to see that. So yeah, to your point, I mean, just because so many editors that you send something to don't like it, you maybe just haven't found that one that's just like, oh my gosh, I'm in love with this, and you kind of get discouraged and you go on. But I mean, clearly it worked out for you in the end. With Phil,
it's the same with novels. It's the same with novels. People get discouraged because they send the novel to 30 agents or editors and they all pass and they're like, oh, this is must be garbage or whatever. It's like, it's not. It's just, you got to find the right, and you don't want to latch on to an agent or an editor that is half-hearted about a book. You want them to love it. You want them to really want it to succeed and to really believe in you as a writer and believe in the book. So it's nothing to get discouraged about. It's just perseverance is the key to this game. You gotta keep working. You gotta keep creating, and just keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and eventually the dam will break. I mean, I've had some really rough stretches. There's been a couple times where I have definitely been like ready to hang it up because I went through I'd go through rough stretch of rejections, or I wouldn't feel like I was making any progress. And I just posted on Facebook about this, but when I get that way, what I've learned to do is I just, I put the blinders on. I forget about all that stuff, all the noise about publishing and reviews and future success or sales or whatever it is. And I focus on the work. It's like me and the story. That's it. That's the only 2 things in this room. And I really absorb myself into the work. And it reminds me that I enjoy that. And it reminds me of why I do it. And for me, that's got me through some really rough times. So it sounds simple, but it's kind of a mindset thing.
Yeah. It's interesting you brought that up. I talked to Martha Wells a couple of weeks ago, and there was a point in her career where she just about gave up writing. And that was prior to all the success that she's had with the Murderbot series.
Yeah.
She was like, I think I'm done. I don't have a voice. I haven't sold anything in a couple of years. And then, of course, Murderbot hits, and then it's just a massive success. And she's got another, set of books that she's already signed on with and everything. It's just, it's crazy. So, I mean, you just don't know unless you just persevere to see if there's still something there. It's on a way smaller scale, but I mean, the same thing with like blogs and stuff. I mean, when I first started my blog, I got like no traction for like years. But I was like, I'm just going to keep doing it. I enjoy it. I enjoy reading books and talking about them. And I mean, I hate saying I'm a success now, but like, I feel like I've gotten some kind of success now because I've got a lot of contributors. My blog is starting to get blurbs on books and on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and stuff. Like, I'm starting to see the blog name everywhere. And I'm like, this is really neat. Like, I enjoy this, but I never want to get to the point where I take it for granted. And I'm just like, oh, I can't believe I didn't do, et cetera, et cetera. But, there were points in time where I'm like, gosh, I mean, it's not worth it. I'm not living up to X expectations.
Right.
I'm not as good as the next guy, that's doing so well. And I think a lot of it just came down to, like trying to emulate somebody else, and that's exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the biggest, pitfall you can fall into is comparing yourself to other people. And it's hard not to, especially in the age of social media, when it's like, I sold a book, and you're just like, motherfucker. And you're sweating and typing in the middle of the night.
Right.
But the reality is everyone has their own journey, and your journey is going to be different than someone else's. And what I was going to say about the other thing is, about the subjectivity is, the one thing I think is important for a writer is to have a voice. Because if you try and write the way someone else writes, or in the style someone else writes in, or people read that writer, if they read that writer, they don't need to read your writing.
Yeah.
And if you have a voice, I'm kind of contradicting myself earlier, but people do feel that, like, can always tell when they're reading a Philip Fracassi story, even if it's told in a different style. So I'm talking more about voice than I am style. But if you can write in a unique voice, or write in your voice, right? Eventually you're going to find an audience, because someone's going to want to read the way you write. Someone's going to want to hear your voice. Someone's going to want to hear the way you tell something. And it, maybe it's millions of people, or maybe it's hundreds of people, but you'll find an audience. So I think that's why perseverance is important, because you just got to find that entryway. And then once you do, I think you'll notice that the crack widens, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, because now there's another writer who's people who are, maybe they also like, because we're maybe in a similar ballpark. And so now I can kind of tap into that audience and maybe tap into this other audience, and you start finding yourself, accumulating a readership. And it's hard, man. It's hard. It's it's devastatingly, humiliatingly hard, but for me, it's like, this is what I do. I can't imagine doing anything else. I don't want to do anything else. It's the most fulfilling thing I do in my life. And so I'm kind of forced to find a way, and I've been forced to find a way. And so far it's worked out, although it's been bumpy for sure.
Yeah, I understand. Well, next I want to talk about your upcoming collection, Beneath the Pale Sky, which is coming out on June 18th from Lethe Press. So give us an idea kind of what's going into there. I've seen, you've got blurbs popping up all over the place from some big names like Paul Tremblay. You've got an introduction from Josh Mallerman. I saw Christopher Golden give you a blurb the other day. So, clearly it sounds pretty amazing. So I know a lot of people are going to be excited to get their hands on it. So what I guess kind of stories are we looking forward to in that collection?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So it's, I'm really happy with this collection, and I think it turned out better than I thought it would, and in the sense that there's a couple original novella length or novelette length, I guess, stories, probably around 15 to 20,000 words that open the book that have never been published. And then I think everything else in that book has been previously published, but a lot of it got published in very small places. One was as part of an anthology that was part of a writer convention, and I think they probably only sold a couple hundred copies. I have no idea, but so things like that. So it's very exciting for me to get some of this work out into a wider audience. But as far as the types of stories, I think people who have read Behold the Void will feel they're similar. I do experiment a little bit more in these stories. I think this is probably an example of me kind of expanding my range a little bit, or at least trying to. I tried some different things. I took some more risks that I probably didn't take in the first batch of stories. This was kind of me trying to expand my range, as it were. So I tried some different things, and but for the most part, they're all supernatural thrillers. They're horror. But there's a couple of stories in here that I think will surprise some people, and that they're not traditional horror stories, and they're maybe not even a thriller. It's just a story. But but the response has been really great, and I went from Jonathan Jans to Jeremy Robert Johnson to Christopher Golden to Zoya Stage has been really it's been really humbling for me to get kind words from those folks, and Josh doing the introduction was amazing, and I owe him like 3 Jack and Cokes for that, I think. And it's gotten, this is the first book that's gone out to press, as it were, Publishers Weekly, Book List, Library Journal. Behold the Void, for multiple reasons, did not go through that process. So it's been exciting and interesting for me to kind of see that part of the thing. And I've gotten great reviews from Book List. I got a great, I would say a positive review from Publishers Weekly. And I know the Library Journal review is coming out soon. And a little bird told me it was also very positive. So that's great, obviously, for me to hear. It's very rewarding for all the work you put in. But I'm really excited about it. I think it's really entertaining. In my stories, I strive to entertain first. And and then everything else comes after that. I don't want people to be bored reading my work. I don't want people to forget about a story 3 minutes after they finished reading it. So I try to make my stories impactful, and I try to make them emotionally charged, and I try to make them fun, and sort of crazy. I mean, that's part of it is, again, going back to that, like keeping yourself interested, is I never want to write a story that I don't want to read. And if I'm writing a story and I'm getting to a point where I'm like, geez, you know what? This is kind of like boring me. Like, or it's like, oh, now I'm going to do this and now I'm going to do this. And if I feel that way, I'll stop and I'll be like, wait a minute, what if we just turn this thing around and look at it from a different way, and maybe find a different way to go with this. And then I get excited again and I kind of, go that way. So I always try and keep myself really engaged so that, and I think that comes across when you're reading someone's work. I think if the writer is bored writing it, I think it comes across. So I always try and make sure I'm having fun and I'm engaged with their work, so that, I feel the odds are better that the reader will feel the same way.
Gotcha. And then I want to talk about, which I don't have a copy to show. I'm sure you might, but I want to talk about a little bit about Boys in the Valley. So I guess we'll call it your debut, right? Your debut novel.
Yeah.
That's going to be coming out around Halloween from Earthling. So can you tell us a little bit about what to expect from your debut novel? And then got a nice little blurb on there from Andy Davidson, who's one of my favorite horror writers. Which I know he gave you a shout out during TBRCon, so I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, Andy's a great guy and a wonderful, wonderful writer. And he was kind enough to do the introduction to Boys in the Valley, so he's got an intro in there, which is something that Earthling does for their special editions. So it's interesting because so that's coming out on Halloween. I don't have a physical copy. I don't have an ARC or anything yet, but the cover was just revealed on my Facebook page. You can see it, or my Twitter account page, or on Earthling's page. But yeah, that was interesting because Paul Miller is the publisher, and he approached me and he kind of said, "Hey, do you have any novels floating around? I'm a fan of your short work." And I literally had just finished writing a novel, and I had another novel which was currently being shopped by my agent, and I had the other novel which at the time hadn't been sold. It has been since. And so I was like, well, these are the novels I have. One is I just kind of finished, so it still needs some time in the oven, so to speak. And the other two are, here and here. And the one he liked was the one I just finished. Liked by meaning it fit for what he wanted to do. He had to read all three, but he liked the length, and he liked the concept and stuff like that. And so I was like, he's like, yeah, I would like to buy this novel and publish it. And I was like, that's awesome. I need to rewrite it really fast because it's like my second draft you just read. So I really cranked out, like I really, spent a lot of time tied to my desk doing an intensive rewrite, and polish of that book. And it's about, and I love it. The thing is, my novels, a couple, not all of them, but a couple of the novels I've written, including that one, are based actually on my own screenplays that I wrote and never sold or never got produced. And so I was able to kind of streamline the process because I had the story written. I knew all the beats. I knew all the characters. I had the characters all in my head already. So it was, even though it's a very different thing to write a novel, because there's a lot more that comes into it than just cutting and pasting the screenplay, but so it allowed me to kind of work a little faster and to play with some things a little, that I was able to kind of look at what I already had and be like, well, I could do this a little bit differently, or I could make this character a little bit different. So it's about an orphanage, a boys' orphanage at the turn of the century, and it's kind of this rural, middle of nowhere orphanage set into this Pennsylvania valley, and historically accurate for the most part as to that these types of things existed and where they existed and how they were run. And I had this idea of like, what if this, I don't want to give anything away, but I was kind of like, what if this sort of evil permeated this remote location of these semi-abused boys, very young. We're talking like ages 6 to 16, right? So young boys, and it just and so that's kind of the basis of the story. It's sort of, I kind of describe the elevator pitch as Lord of the Flies meets The Exorcist. So it's a lot about, but it goes deep. There's a lot of deeper themes. I get into like, things like, what does it mean to sacrifice? What does it mean to what is to have a friendship? And so that's what the basic gist of the story is. So I'm really excited for people to read it. I'm totally shocked it's the first book that I wrote that's coming out, because A Child Alone with Strangers, which is a big 650-page novel, was the first horror novel I wrote. And then I wrote another one called Gothic, and then I wrote Boys in the Valley. So the fact that Boys in the Valley is the first one to come out is kind of bizarre, but happily so.
But I say it probably bodes well for your other two, because I think I saw you mention something about Gothic on Facebook. Is that the one you're reworking on right now?
No, so I have the big novel Child Alone with Strangers, which I have sold, which is coming to come out next year, but it hasn't been announced yet. And hopefully that same publisher will pick up another book, maybe even 2 other books. We'll see. That should all be announced over the next 4 to 6 weeks, because there's going to be like a press release and stuff. And then Gothic was a book that I wrote 2 years ago. I think I finished at the end of I finished it at the end of 2021, and right before the pandemic hit. And that's currently being shopped by my agent. So she's trying to sell that one. So that one's still quote unquote up for grabs. And then the one I'm writing right now, which I'm about 25,000 words into, I just started it a couple weeks ago, is called The Blue Butterfly. And it's a thriller and kind of a little more traditional mainstream novel than the other 3, in the sense that it's more of a thriller versus horror, but there is definitely some horrific elements. But it's more of a mystery, supernatural mystery. And I'm really hoping that I can write this one as part of a trilogy. So the hope is to write Blue Butterfly, and then I have 2 other follow-ups that I've already have summaries for, and I kind of know what's going to happen, and that's in that character storyline. So the hope is that once it's finished, I'll probably have it finished by end of June, and then hand it over to my agent. And then once she hopefully finds someone who's interested in it, my hope, fingers crossed, is that we'll be able to package it as a trilogy, because that would be my goal, would be to spend the next couple of years writing these 3 books. But we'll see. I mean, that's the thing about writing, is you never know. I could write this thing and may I have another idea, and I write that and I sell it in, a week. And then, this one's still hanging on the vine a year from now. So you don't know. And that's why I kind of tell people, like, just keep creating, like keep making the donuts, because, and I understand it's different for different people. People have different schedules. They have different lives, and they write at a certain pace or whatever. And so I'm not saying don't lean on one novel. If that's what you have, it's awesome. But the more you can work, the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. And for me, if I could sit at my desk for 10 hours a day, every day, man, I'd be the happiest guy in the world, and I just love creating. And I have so many stories in my head. I mean, I have a hard drive called ideas. It's, in the hundreds now. And it's just a matter of finding the time to get them all out. But I hope to have that time. I hope to get, I figure I have about 20 years or so, maybe 20, maybe 30 if I'm lucky. And that's all hopefully I can get as much of this stuff out into the world as I can.
I gotcha. And now I know you wanted to talk a little bit about, was it Commodore? Is that
your
new little Little novella.
Yeah, so I revealed this cover on social media a little bit ago, but this is Commodore, and this is actually the limited edition jacket. There's going to be a trade edition, a hardcover trade edition, and a limited edition of I think 77 copies, and the trade edition will be wide, but it's illustrated. It's got like 4 or 5 illustration paintings inside of it, and it's coming from Strange Eons. It's their first book, Strange Eons magazine, the same publishers, but this will be their first foray into book publishing. And I think I can probably show you one of the. I don't think Kelly will get mad at me. He might. I don't care. I can take him. But this is sort of, gives you an idea of like that it's really beautifully illustrated. And the fun thing about Commodore is it's just going to pop out like a baby you didn't know was there. It's just going to be, I don't know when it's coming. He could literally post the page for it later today. I have no idea. Or it could be in 2 weeks, or it could be in 2 months. I don't know. Because he's they're just kind of like they just want to like, as soon as it's ready to go, it's going to go out. So gotcha. So I'm as curious as anybody, but it could be any day that'll become available. So I'm trying to keep a list of people who have told me they want one of the limited editions, so I can at least email them really quick and be like, okay, it's up.
Hurry up.
I want my readers to be happy, right? But yeah, so hopefully that'll come out very soon. So for this year, I have the Beneath the Pale Sky, that novella, and then on Halloween, Boys in the Valley, the debut novel. And then I have like 3, 4 stories in different anthologies that are still coming out this year. One from PS Publishing, some different anthologies and stuff. And then I'm also going to have there's going to be a short run deluxe edition of Beneath the Pale Sky that Independent Legions is doing. I don't know when that's coming out. And then I have a few foreign press editions, a Spanish edition, an Italian edition of Behold the Void's coming out, and maybe a Czech edition.
Well, dadgum.
Lots of different stuff.
Yeah, that's lots of stuff happening.
But it's comparative. But this is what I'm saying about. This is how it goes. You got to ride the. You can't get too high or too low, because 2019 and 2018, frankly, were really dry years, and I was spending a lot of that time. I was spending writing this big novel that's coming out next year. But there was I think a window of about 18 months where I don't think I had anything come out. So it's kind of, and now it's like, oh my God, I have too much stuff coming out. You know what I mean? It's like people are going to be so sick of me. But you can't. I can only control so much. You can't. When something sells or when something breaks or when something is released, the author only has so much control over that. And so the fact that I'm kind of a lot of stuff is hitting at once is a lot of fun. But I also feel like I'm really saturating the marketplace, and I don't want people to get sick of me. But I like I said, I can't control it. But I like having stuff come out. It's a lot of fun. And I have a book of poems coming out called Tomorrow's Gone. That's coming out this fall from Hybrid Sequence Media. And then next year I'll have the big novel, and I have a children's book, and then we'll see. Depending on whether this publisher buys or whatever happens with these other books and stories, I don't know. Yeah. So I got a nice right now. There's a lot of stuff coming out, so hopefully people enjoy it. And I just want people to be happy. I want people to read these books and be like, that was great. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that, and because that makes me really happy. That's like the best reward for me. And so I hope people have those experiences.
Yeah. Last question I got for you. Anything you've read here recently that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I was going to, I read so much that it tends to blur. Right now I'm reading a new novel by Josh Malerman, an unpublished novel that's been taking up a lot of my time in the best possible way, because it's big. It's really big.
How dare you? I think I know which one you're talking about. And how dare you?
Josh's brain is told, man, you're going on a ride. So it's amazing. But so I've been reading that. I've been reading The Good House by Tanner Reeve Dew, which I've really been enjoying. I'm going to read Stephen Graham Jones' new one, but I haven't read it yet. I'm going to read it right after. I'm doing an interview with him for a Book and Film Globe, so that'll come out. But so I've been kind of tied up reading. I've been kind of tired of reading Josh's book. I keep a list of all my books that I read because I forget. Oh, I read a couple novellas by Tyler Jones that I really enjoyed.
Criterion.
And he wrote a book on The Dark Side of the Room that's really fun. And he's got a story collection coming out. I read a book by Gordon White that's coming out, a novella called Rookfield that was really wonderful. I read Ronald Malfi's newest novella, was great. That's actually out now. Let's see. I read Last House on Needle Street. Everyone should read that book.
Seriously though.
And I read the new one by Christina Henry. It was pretty good. I read an unpublished book by Fred Venturini. That was pretty good. That's coming out, I think, soon. So those are the ones I've read most recently. I will say this: I read a book earlier this year called The Kingdom by Joe Nesbo. Yeah, that was freaking awesome. I'd read one of his Harry Hole books before, and I don't remember being kind of this blown away. But I just read The Kingdom, and I was like, oh my god, this book is so awesome. I just really loved it. It's very Nordic. It's very and it's not even so much a thriller or mystery. It's just kind of about this guy and his brother. But man, I highly recommend that book if you like sort of like those Nordic thrillers or Nordic mysteries. That was an astounding book. Definitely one of the top books I've read this year.
Okay, awesome. Well, Philip, I really appreciate you taking time out of the day to come chat with me. It's been great getting to know you. I mean, just outside of chatting on Facebook and Twitter. Beneath the Pale Sky comes out on June 18th. It is my current read right now, so I will have a review out here very soon. So definitely look for that. I'm going to be looking forward to Boys in the Valley as well because that sounds right up my alley. And yeah, we'll just kind of keep in touch, and we'll try to do this again. Maybe we can have a chat before your big door stopper comes out next year.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It's supposed to come out next spring. And okay. And I'll say this about Boys in the Valley. I'll say two things real quick. Plugs. If you order Beneath the Pale Sky, if you pre-order it through the publisher website, you get a custom signed bookplate, which is kind of neat. They look like the cover. And so that's kind of a nice incentive. And then, but that will be coming out in like an ebook as well. And then, a lot of people have asked me about Boys in the Valley. Right now, the limited deluxe hardcover edition of 500 copies, I think is pretty close to being sold out. And that's it for that novel for at least probably a year. And then maybe at the end of next year or early 2023, there'll be a trade edition. But for right now, there's just the Earthling edition. So that's a lot of people have PM'd me and stuff about it. So I would recommend grabbing one of those if you can. I don't think they're too expensive. But and then I'm also going to be in Nightworm's June package, the subscription package with Josh.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So you'll if you subscribe to Nightworms, you'll be getting a copy of Beneath the Pale Sky already. So it's I think that's been announced. I can't remember, but it's fine. Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Well, Philip, thank you again. Best of luck with the rest of this year with your releases, and we'll talk again soon. Maybe we'll try to set up something for next spring.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a good one.